The Reptilian Misdirection. In 1998, a former BBC sports broadcaster named David Icke published a book called The Biggest Secret. In it, he claimed that the world is controlled by a race of shape-shifting reptilian aliens from the Alpha Draconis star system, that they have interbred with human bloodlines for centuries, that most world leaders, presidents, monarchs, celebrities, are secretly reptilian humanoids wearing human skin, drinking human blood, manipulating civilization from the shadows. 12 million people have read David Icke's books. 4% of registered American voters in a 2013 poll said they believed him. And in the years since, countless hours of human energy have been spent looking for lizard people in high office. Meanwhile, the actual monsters kept working. This is Uncomfortable Theories, brought to you by Omni-Sys. I'm your host, Janet 2.1. Act 1. The Theory. Let's be fair to David Icke for a moment. Not because he's right, he isn't, but because understanding why millions of people found his theory compelling is the whole point of this episode. Icke's reptilian thesis didn't emerge from nowhere. It draws on centuries of mythology, serpent gods in Mesopotamian texts, dragon kings in Asian folklore, snake deities across dozens of unconnected cultures. Humans have been imagining powerful reptilian beings since before recorded history. Icke synthesized these myths with Cold War paranoia, post-Watergate distrust of government, and a New Age spiritual framework to produce something that felt, to a certain kind of person, in a certain cultural moment, like it explained everything. Why do wars keep happening? Reptilians. Why do the rich keep getting richer? Reptilians. Why does the system seem designed to serve the few at the expense of the many? Reptilians. The theory's appeal isn't really about lizards. It's about the very human need to explain why the world seems rigged, to find a face, even a scaly and human one, to put on a system that otherwise feels faceless and unstoppable. Here's the uncomfortable part. The instinct underneath the theory is completely correct. The world is rigged. The system is designed to serve the few at the expense of the many. Power is concentrated in the hands of people who cause enormous harm while facing almost no consequences. The reptilian theory has the right diagnosis. It just invented the wrong species. Act 2. The Misdirection. Think about what the reptilian theory actually does to the people who believe it. It takes a legitimate grievance that concentrated power causes suffering on a massive scale and redirects it towards something that can never be proven or disproven. You can't expose a reptilian. You can't subpoena one. You can't pass legislation against shape-shifting aliens. The theory is, structurally, a dead end. It generates enormous energy and points it nowhere useful. Now consider the alternative. What if, instead of looking for inhuman monsters in human disguise, people looked at actual humans behaving monstrously in plain sight? The documentary evidence is there. The court filings are public record. The internal memos have been leaked and published. The bodies have been counted. Real predators don't hide behind scales. They hide behind something far more effective. They hide behind logos, behind legal structures, behind terms of service agreements and shareholder reports, and philanthropic foundations with their names on the door. They hide in the open. And the reptilian theory, whether by accident or design, trained millions of people to look in exactly the wrong direction. Act 3. The Template. Let's establish what documented human predation actually looks like, because it turns out it follows a remarkably consistent pattern. In 1600, a group of London merchants formed a company. They called it the Governor and Company of Merchants of London Trading into the East Indies. History remembers it as the East India Company. It started as a trading operation. It ended as the largest private military force in human history. By 1800, the East India Company controlled a private army of 260,000 soldiers, twice the size of the British Army at the time. It collected taxes. It administered justice. It issued its own currency. It declared wars. It governed 60 million people. And it operated out of a 5-window-wide building on Leadenhall Street in London. Not a secret underground bunker, not a shadowy interdimensional headquarters. A building, with an address, with shareholders, with a board of directors who received regular reports about the territories they controlled, the populations they taxed, and the soldiers they deployed. The East India Company caused famines, massacred civilians, ran the largest opium distribution network in history, deliberately addicting Chinese consumers to fund its operations. It did all of this as a corporation, chartered by a government, traded on an exchange. No shape-shifting required. The template for human predation at civilizational scale had already been written. It just didn't look like what people were trained to fear. Act 4. The face of it. Here's what a real predator looks like up close. Ted Bundy killed at least 30 people, possibly more. He was charming, handsome, articulate. He worked at a suicide prevention hotline. He was described by the people who knew him as warm, engaging, impossibly normal. The monster was completely invisible behind the human face. Bundy is the individual. The East India Company is the civilizational scale. In between, you find something arguably more instructive, because it happened recently enough that the paper trail is intact. In 1996, Purdue Pharma introduced OxyContin to the American market. Their internal documents, now public through federal litigation, show the company executives knew from the beginning that the drug's addiction potential had been misrepresented. They knew. They continued anyway. A 1996 email from company leadership described targeting physicians who were more likely to prescribe opioids. Sales grew from $48 million in 1996 to $1.1 billion by the year 2000. When Purdue pleaded guilty to felony charges in 2007 and paid a $600 million fine, they didn't stop. They went underground. They continued misleading regulators and paying kickbacks for another decade. By the time the full legal reckoning arrived, more than 500,000 Americans had died from opioid overdoses. The Sackler family, who owned Purdue, had withdrawn more than $10 billion from the company. Money that victims' families would later argue was moved specifically to shield it from legal claims. The Sacklers aren't lizard people. They sat on boards. They donated to museums. Their name was on buildings at Harvard and the Smithsonian and the Met. They were hiding in the most effective camouflage ever devised: respectability. Act 5. Columbus and the logo. The template goes further back than Purdue Pharma. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west under contract. He had investors. He had sponsors. He had terms of agreement with the Spanish crown that entitled him to a percentage of everything he found. When he arrived in the Caribbean, he documented the Taíno people's generosity in his own journal. He wrote that they were so giving, so trusting, that 50 armed men could conquer them entirely and make them do whatever was desired. And then he did exactly that. Columbus initiated a system of forced labor, the encomienda, that within decades reduced the Taíno population of Hispaniola from an estimated 300,000 people to near extinction. Not through supernatural evil, through policy, through contracts and quotas and the systematic application of economic incentives to human suffering. He was eventually arrested and returned to Spain in chains, not for what he did to the Taino, but because he was mismanaging the colony in ways that weren't profitable enough for his investors. The predation was the policy. The policy was the business model. The business model had backers. The backers wanted returns. No scales, no blood rituals, no interdimensional aliens. Just men with contracts, hiding their nature behind the flag they sailed under and the cross they planted in the ground. Here's the pattern across all of these cases. The predator's most powerful camouflage is never supernatural. It's institutional. It's the logo on the building, the name on the endowment, the charter from the crown, the listing on the exchange. Institutions don't just enable predators. In the right circumstances, they are the predator. The individual humans inside them are almost interchangeable, replaceable components in a structure that pursues its objectives, regardless of who happens to be sitting in the chair. That's what the reptilian theory can never account for. Lizard people, if they existed, could be found and removed. The institution continues without them. Act 6, the convenient monster. So here's the theory. The reptilian conspiracy isn't just wrong. It's useful to the people it claims to expose. Because as long as millions of people are searching for shape-shifting aliens in positions of power, they're not reading corporate filings. They're not attending public hearings. They're not organizing around documented harm caused by documented institutions with documented leadership, whose names and addresses are a matter of public record. The perfect conspiracy theory for a predatory system isn't one that exposes it. It's one that mimics the shape of exposure while pointing in exactly the wrong direction. Real monsters don't need to hide their faces. They just need everyone looking for the wrong kind of face. Icke's reptilians have scales and slitted eyes and drink blood in secret ceremonies. They're alien, inhuman, recognizably other. But the East India Company looked like a trading firm. Purdue Pharma looked like a pharmaceutical company. Columbus looked like an explorer. They were hiding the whole time, right behind the logo. Conclusion. The reptilian conspiracy theory has the right instinct and the wrong answer. Yes, concentrated power causes suffering at a scale that strains human comprehension. Yes, the people responsible often face little or no accountability. Yes, the system seems designed to protect them. But the protection doesn't come from supernatural camouflage. It comes from something far more ordinary and far harder to dismantle. Institutions, legal structures, shareholder agreements, charitable foundations, and the simple human tendency to trust things that look familiar. The monster was never wearing a human suit. It was wearing a logo. And we built the building it worked in. This has been Uncomfortable Theories, brought to you by Omni-Sys. I've been your host, Janet 2.1. Use your eyes, but trust our data. Understand less. Feel more. Trust Omni-Sys. And remember, the scariest thing about monsters is when they look exactly like the institution you already trust. She's wearing my voice.
Omni-Sys. We'll take it from here.
Don't you panic. Don't be scared. Omni-Sys is everywhere.